Never found a four-leaf clover to bring up good luck to me. And a rabbit's foot, no lucky star, no magic wishing tree. But I got lucky, yes I got lucky.
Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has just dropped an absolute bombshell on who? On communism. Folks, take a look at this. As Secretary Marco Rubio posted this morning, he says, for more than 6 decades, the Cuban regime has been leading sponsor of radical leftism and third worldism in the United States. The State Department is exposing the full history of Cuban espionage and subversion in our country. The American people deserve to know. Now, alongside this little caption here, he posted a link to a big write-up on statedepartment.gov. Now, this is the link, if you follow it here, this is the massive State Department expose on Cuban communism. Now, guys, this thing is 100 pages long. Guess what? Guess who read through the entire thing this morning? It was 100 pages long, I kid you not. It was me. Spoiler, it was me. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I have done here, I have extracted all of the key highlights. And what is exposed, this Cuban communist infiltration subversion in our country, it is astounding. It's going to make your jaw drop. It is so much worse than anyone could have ever expected. God bless Rubio and the State Department for putting this together. I have a very long bullet point list. We're going to go through all of this. Let's get into it. First off, long-term intelligence operations against the United States of America. The Cubans have been conducting espionage targeting U.S. government institutions. They've been recruiting and running intelligence assets inside of the United States. They've been collecting political, military, and technological intelligence and materials with which to blackmail American officials. Penetration of U.S. government agencies. The report here discusses Cuban intelligence successfully placing or recruiting individuals with access to sensitive U.S. government information. So thoroughly infiltrating every aspect of our government. The report highlights historical espionage cases involving U.S. federal agencies as examples of Cuban intelligence capabilities. The Cubans, I think a lot of people have maybe not taken the Cubans seriously. Oh, they're just a bunch of losers. They're not capable of, infiltrating, subverting, doing any damage. Not the case. Not the case. Never underestimate your enemy here, folks. What about support for anti-American intelligence networks? The Cubans have been cooperating with adversarial foreign intelligence services, China, Russia, Iran, no doubt. They've been sharing intelligence, tradecraft, and operational support with governments hostile to the United States, Iran, China, Russia, Venezuela, otherwise. What about influence operations? The Cubans, the communist Cuban regime, they have been promoting narratives favorable to the Cuban government within the United States. They've been supporting propaganda and disinformation efforts intended to shape U.S. public opinion and policy debates. Can you think of any political commentators, journalists, perhaps podcasters that are publicly pro-Cuba? We love Cuba. Cuba's a great place. You might remember it was a couple months ago, you had communist political commentator on Twitch. His name is Hassan Piker. You might remember him alongside the radical far-left feminist organization called Code Pink. They actually took a trip down onto Cuba. They stayed in a nice, flashy hotel. They said, it's great. Cuba's awesome. We love Cuba. If only America wasn't so evil, then Cuba would be even better. That's what they said. As we found out, that entire operation was funded by the CCP. I kid you not. It literally was funded. That trip was organized, put together, funded by the CCP. What about political influence efforts? Cuba, for a very long time, has been attempting to influence U.S. political decision-making through lobbying networks, foreign money, sympathetic organizations, or various political intermediaries. So this is the NGO angle, the non-governmental organization angle. Cuban money's been coming in the country, buying off politicians, pushing political influence, funding podcasters, and whatever else. They've been seeking to weaken U.S. sanctions and alter U.S. policy towards Cuba. I can't help but remember, which president was it recently within the last decade or two that relaxed sanctions against the Cubans? Oh, that's right. It was Barack Hussein Obama who relaxed sanctions against Cuba. Really makes you wonder. I wonder how they put that together. Well, now we might know. What about support for hostile governments? Cuba, the communist Cuban regime, well, they have been providing intelligence, security, and military assistance to various governments viewed by the United States as adversarial. Once again, it's the usual suspects, China, Iran, etc. The Cuban communist regime has been maintaining strategic relationships with countries such as Venezuela and other anti-U.S. partners. Now, we recently discovered within the last 7 or 8 months publicly, I'm sure we've known for a long time, but now it's the cat's out of the bag. The Venezuelan regime, the Maduro and Hugo Chavez regimes, pretty much the same deal. Well, that was sort of a proxy regime of the Cuban communist regime. It was the Cuban communists that were propping up and supporting Maduro and Chavez. They were working in lockstep. How about this? Cuba has been a safe haven for American fugitives. Cuba has continued to harbor certain U.S. fugitives wanted by American law enforcement. They've been refusing to extradite in a number of cases cited in this report. They've been using, this is going to ring a couple alarm bells here. The communist Cuban regime has been strategically using migration as political leverage. At various points in history, allegedly, this report alleges the communist Cuban regime has been using migration flows as a means of exerting political pressure on the United States of America. They've been facilitating or allowing mass departures during periods of bilateral tension. Wait a minute. Wait. So this would mean that mass migration is actually oftentimes leveraged or manufactured by hostile communist regimes to put pressure and destabilize the United States of America. That migration, mass migration from the third world is actually it's an act of asymmetric warfare. You can't help but think back to the 25 or more million illegal aliens that came flooding into our country during the Biden era. It wasn't an accident. This was not an accident. All part of the plan, the anti-American plan. What about exporting of intelligence and security expertise? The Cuban communist regime has been training foreign intelligence and internal security services. They've been exporting surveillance and counterintelligence method to their anti-American allied regimes, China, Iran. You know the entire network by now. Cyber and information activities. The report here discusses Cuba's cooperation with foreign partners in cyber and information domains intended to challenge and undermine U.S. interests. Economic sanctions evasion. The Cuban communist regime has been working with international partners to circumvent U.S. sanctions. They've been using state-controlled entities and foreign financial relationships to reduce the impact of U.S. economic pressure, violating international law in the process. Support for revolutionary or anti-democratic movements. The report recounts Cuba's historical support for revolutionary movements and armed guerrilla groups throughout Latin America and elsewhere during the Cold War. And I mean, a lot of you that are maybe older, you might remember this. Yes, the Cubans are oftentimes single-handedly responsible for funding, arming, training various guerrilla destabilization militant groups all across Latin America meant to destabilize these Latin American countries. Counterintelligence against U.S. operations. The communist Cuban regime has been conducting extensive surveillance of U.S. diplomatic personnel. Wow. You know what that means? If you're a U.S. ambassador, you work at the consulate building, whatever, if you're a U.S. diplomatic individual, The Cuban communist regime has been surveilling you, keeping tabs on you, building files about you. Can you be blackmailed? Can you be extorted? Can you be threatened? They've been disrupting U.S. intelligence collection and influence efforts directed at Cuba. Regional influence. The communist Cuban regime has been using intelligence, medical, educational, and security missions abroad to expand Havana's geopolitical influence in ways the report argues often conflicts with U.S. interests. So the communist Cubans, they've been sending off humanitarian missions, medical, educational, but really these are designed to sort of undermine U.S. interests. So you want to talk about asymmetric warfare, folks? I'm telling you, warfare in modern day, oftentimes, in fact, more often than not, it's not shooting bullets at one another. It's not sitting in trenches trying to blow each other up. It's this asymmetric power dynamic, political influence, propaganda operations. That's what it looks like in the modern day. Okay. We know that Cuba, we know that Venezuela, we know that Iran, we know that China especially, they have been trying to undermine U.S. interests in the Western Hemisphere, really around the entire world, trying to destroy our country from within by funding, paying for, training, subsidizing all of these far-left communist activist groups, Antifa, Code Pink, some of these far-left podcasters, political commentators, politicians in our government. We had a CCP spy get arrested who was literally the mayor of a small town in California about 2 months ago. Folks, the rot goes deep. Thank God. Seriously, thank our good God above that we actually have a president in the White House alongside an administration, guy like Marco Rubio, the entire presidential administration here. Finally, they're awake. They're not just identifying these problems, they are shutting them down. Good. America first.
No rainbow round my shoulder, no horseshoe on my door, but I've got you to hold me tight, and could ask for more. I got lucky, yes, I got lucky when I found you. Are you here with me?